Hello, welcome after the great lunch. And we're back here. I'm Carlotta Paltrinieri. I used to be senior researcher on Towards the National Collection. And today I have the pleasure of chairing this panel that will discuss some of the key findings and lessons learned in using IIIF for UK cultural heritage collections, especially in two of the foundation projects that started the program. So I will just introduce the speakers and then they will lead the floor. So Joe Padfield is our first speaker. He served as the principal investigator for TaNC Foundation Project Practical Applications of IIIF. He's now one of the principal scientists at the National Gallery in London, and his research focuses on the organization and sustainability of heritage science data, the generation of fair digital resources, and the development of practical digital infrastructure solutions. He spearheaded the National Gallery's involvement in several national and international research programs, including examining the interoperability of instrumentation and digital documentation in the Hyperion HSH 2020 project. Okay. He represents the National Gallery in the new ECHOS Horizon Europe project, contributing to the development of the European Collaborative Cloud for Cultural Heritage. Then we have Gethin Rees, was principal investigator of TaNC's Foundation Project Locating a National Collection. He has recently been appointed as lecturer in digital products and industries in the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College London. Congratulations, Gethin. Before taking up his current position, he was based at the British Library, where he helped to manage the non-print legal deposit of digital maps and coordinating the georeferencer crowdsourcing project. He has also worked on two collaborative history projects funded by the ERC and as a software developer. Also from the British Library, Adam Tovell is the head of technical services at the British Library's Sound Archive, home to the UK's sound collection. His specialisms include audio and audiovisual digitization, training, digital preservation, preservation planning, and metadata for time-based media. He currently leads the preservation of the National Collection with a team of audio engineers, electronic engineers, trainers, metadata, and conservation specialists, and has a passion for the undiscovered and the unpreserved. That's written here. I'm not making it up. Ronald Haynes is a senior computer officer and regent at the University of Cambridge, a strategic consultant for 31 colleges, University Library, University Church, Continuing Education, Fitzwilliam Museum, and many more. I cut a few because, yeah. He researches collaborative XR and immersive technologies of for cultural heritage, leads a collaborative Darwin 3D project, is partner on the proposed UK National 3D Repository and Complex Data Service. He co-chairs the IIIF 3D community and technical specification groups. He's a Cambridge Digital Humanities Associate and is on advisory boards for the Swiss, the X Archiving London, and 3D Frame. And I am done, and you guys have the floor. Joe.
Good afternoon. So with this panel, we're each going to give a short talk explaining part of our own background in relation to this, and then we will move on to some discussion. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction to IIIF and a little bit about our project. So IIIF, which is pronounced, what's IIIF? It's IIIF, is the International Image Interoperability Framework. So it's an international standard for sharing images and audiovisual files across the internet. And it was developed to allow people to dynamically connect resources from multiple different sources and present them on the web. So it's got global support. There's a huge number now, a growing number of institutions around the world, of museums, galleries, libraries, universities, and private companies who support it. There's a huge range of versatile tools to help engage with it and use it. And it's designed for efficiency and accessibility. So the store once used multiple times idea, which I'll come back to. So what it does for you. So IIIF lets institutions provide open access to their digital content while retaining control of their digital content. So the idea is they store it, they hold it, but they can present it in lots of different places. So you maintain that dynamic engagement between the source and the use. So you can see who's been using your resources, how they've been using it, and how they're sort of benefiting from it. It provides cross-collection access because different institutions can all present content using the same standard and people can mix them together. And it is greater support. It's got, well, once you have access to all of this, it provides greater access, supports new applications for researchers, educations, and the public. So, as I said, it's very important. It provides improved sustainability and efficiency. So you store your images once, and you can present them in lots of different places. So that's a good thing to remember. And this approach reduces hosting costs, and it also provides a more sustainable digital preservation structure for your resources going forward. Now, how does this work in practice? So if we have an example of the National Gallery, where I'm from, we have an image store within the National Gallery, and we use IIIF to share all of our research images among the staff using them within the institution. So within scientific or curatorial or conservation, we can all see all of these images. Now, the Yale Centre for British Art actually have a public server. So a lot of their technical images are actually open and public to the outside world. Now, IIIF describes these resources in a small text document called a IIIF manifest. And you can get a link to a IIIF manifest from the Yale Centre for British Art and then just drop it into the tool within the gallery, in the National Gallery, and you can then use Yale Centre for British Art images and National Gallery images within the National Gallery to do the research as you go along. Now, we haven't downloaded those images. We've maintained that connection to the Yale Centre for British Art, and it's come with all of the dynamic, up-to-date metadata that they've wrapped around their images. So that's the benefit from an image point of view. Now, the practical applications of IIIF project, as was mentioned, within the TaNC Foundation structure, we were exploring how we could use IIIF, how we could make it easier to use IIIF, and it was a great collaboration of the various people, the different institutions involved, and we had a lot of fun. It was a really good project. Now, the final report, which the QR code is for, is about 144 pages, I think. But a lot of that's appendices, so you don't necessarily need to read 144 pages, but please do download it and have a look. There's a lot of really useful information in there. Now, these were 4 of the main aims for the project. We wanted to highlight and demonstrate opportunities and benefits of the IIIF standard, examine the potential to virtually connect collections together with IIIF, explore some of the existing tools, and then look at what else might be useful. So the 4 QR codes down the side, there is a slide at the end of this, and the presentation will be available with actually written links in it as well. So we recorded 5 different webinars and seminars covering IIIF and the services and tools, and all of that content is available on the web to view and download through the TaNC website and through various other media. We developed a number of pilots looking at how you use IIIF, including a cross-collection search idea where you could put in one simple search word and search multiple collections at the same time and get IIIF content straight back. We developed processes to increase accessibility of these existing tools, and we also supported the ongoing development of a IIIF manifest editor being put together by Digerati. And all of those are available, and you can go and explore them. Now, when it comes to a national collection, aggregating data and images from hundreds, if not thousands of collections is a monumental task, as all of you will be aware. IIIF provides an efficient, sustainable solution for doing that as far as the media is concerned. Institutions retain control over their collections while contributing live resources in a unified structure. This is the idea. Resources can be accessed and compared dynamically, reducing duplication and maximizing accessibility. So, establishing a foundation for a connected national heritage network. That's the concept. So if you think about it, if you have multiple sources, be they institutions or researchers, and they're all publishing data and images in different formats and structures, a national collection would need to maintain and sustain all of those different types of connections, which just doesn't work if you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of collections. And IIIF simplifies that down to one standard, which means it's kind of required for that kind of scale of work. Now, what that means you can do as an individual organization, you can publish your content through IIIF under an open license for non-commercial activities. You can also publish the same content under a commercial license for commercial activities, and you can also use the same content for internal documentation, management, and activities within an institution. Store it once, use it many, many times. And then you can collaborate with lots more people. So it's a great opportunity. Now, just to end with, Within the project, we did a lot of work and a lot of exploration about how you would share collections and share IIIF information. But the world's moved on slightly since we did that project with the introduction of certain accessible AI systems. So what I decided to do for this is I gathered a list of IIIF source information, and I asked a certain AI system, please make me an OpenSeaDragon-based presentation of these images all in one page so that people can explore it. And there it is. So you've got a QR code for it, and it created the website, and it's on one of the gallery's servers, and you can zoom in and play with them. So the National Gallery has this example, and you can then play and zoom into an image from an entirely different collection to a wonderful resolution of this very nice grimoire from the Art Institute in Chicago. And that was done within 20 minutes. That website was created. And that's what you can do, because it's a standard structure. ChatGPT understands this standard structure and can just produce you that opportunity. So please start exploring. Please do look at the project report and the various outputs from the project. Please do check out the IIIF Awesome list that the IIIF Consortium have put together. There's a whole list of really nice, fun stuff you can do with IIIF. There's a very, very active IIIF community. Please do have a little look, discussion forums and mailing lists and so on and so forth. Do think about IIIF as an infrastructure question. It's not just a tool for playing with and engagement. It is part of strategic data management and constructive management planning. And the consortium have provided lots of documents about IIIF for CIOs and IIIF for different groups of people to explain its use. And there's lots of training material. So some of it's free. You can pay for courses and such, but there's a lot of free stuff there. So please do have a little look. And thank you very much. And just to say, there is a bunch of these links. The presentation will be made available. So all of the things I've mentioned, there will be links for them. And I will now hand over to Gethin. Thank you, Gethin.
Thanks, Joe, for that. I'm going to do the opposite of what you suggested. I'm not going to think about IIIF as an infrastructure question here. Rather, we're just going to give a little example of something we did with IIIF on another TaNC foundational project, which was locating a national collection. And just from the outset, I'd just like to thank the project team. You're not going to be able to tell who they are, but all the same, I'd really like to thank these people and for all their work, as this was a collaborative effort. So, Locating a National Collection helped cultural heritage organisations to use location data, such as where objects were made or used, or the places they depict and describe, the latter important for IIIF, to connect to UK's cultural heritage collections. And this was based on the hypothesis that geographical information, it offered a particularly effective method to break down these boundaries. And in particular, we looked at barriers between, on the one hand, historic environment organisations. They manage sites, and in their collections, in their digital data, there is a lot of coordinates. And GLAMs, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And so we were trying to look at GLAM metadata, which often contains toponyms, place names, and think of ways we can actually use linked data to bring these two types of data together whilst preserving some of the nuance and complexity. And our project created this reusable web mapping software called Peripleo. And here you see visitor sites from across the UK. And what we did was align GLAM objects with these visitor sites at scale. So here's Lindisfarne, and you can from Lindisfarne you can access visitor site information as the primarily, and from English Heritage, our project partner. But you can also then look at access IIIF objects. So there's some historic England data, that's not IIIF, but there's also British Library data aligned with that visitor site. So here are the Lindisfarne Gospels, digitized manuscripts, and also the IIIF version of the Lindisfarne Gospels too. So And with this map, you can link from a visitor site to a URL that holds IIIF, okay? A IIIF image. And then, but there's more you can do with IIIF and maps. So this is another tool that created on a previous project, Recogito, and this is available online. With this tool, you can annotate IIIF images and then download the data. So this involves just drawing a box, bringing in the IIIF URL, drawing a box around on the image, and then tagging that box with any sort of tag, but in particular, a persistent identifier. And those persistent identifiers can be, in many cases, gazetteer entries. So if we look at this example that we annotated for the Locating a National Collection project, we took this image, which is Holler's which depicts Holler's tour of Britain in England and Wales in 1660. It's an etching in the British Library's collections. And two volunteers on a previous project had annotated this. That's the VI Regii project, so big thanks to them. They annotated each of these individual little images of landmarks across England and Wales, and they tagged those with a gazetteer URI. So that gazetteer URI included the name of the place, but also coordinate data and also variant names too. So for example, here we see Tynemouth Castle. It's spelled without an E. So if we then, on Locating a National Collection, what we then did was make a map of this image. And so if we look at this second video of map, we see this is the tour that Holler went on, visualized. These are all the places he visited. And we could do that because they had annotated with coordinates. Here it links to that part of the image that depicts Tynemouth Castle. And then also the persistent identifier allowed us to, again, in this case, link to other URLs, other web pages out there. As you'll see here, Tynemouth is spelled with an E now. And so through enriching that image, with IIIF annotations, we made the image more discoverable. We could do some interesting things with it. Okay, that's it from me, thanks. But if you're interested in using Peripleo, this is a reusable web map component. If you're making maps with your project, don't use Google My Maps for loads of reasons, it's rubbish. Do use Peripleo. Write me an email. I mean, you can't see the email, but do write me an email. Come up and speak to me afterwards, and we can, or come along to this tutorial that's happening in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll be walking you through the steps to create your own Peripleo map. Okay, thanks very much.
Right then. Thanks, Gethin. Love a map. Love audio as well, though. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about a major project which has been and gone, but has a legacy, which is good, which is the Unlocking Our Sound Heritage project, which was headed by the British Library a few years ago. I'm going to give you a little bit of context behind that project, i.e. What was the purpose of it, what we did, what the challenges were, and how we leveraged IIIF in the delivery of that project, just to give you a bit of a flavour about how IIIF can apply to, in this case, sound collections, but use your imagination and think about moving image collections as well at the same time. So, British Library, yes, it's not just books, we hold the National Sound Collection. That comprises currently over 1.5 million physical items in our basements, discs and tapes and all kinds of formats, totaling over 6.5 million recordings of speech, music, wildlife, and the environment, dating from the 1880s to the present day. We literally have the first recordings made in the UK, and there will be recordings collected as I speak. So it's 75% published material, i.e. stuff that would be released commercially, and 25% unpublished collections, and that will become more important later on in over 40 different formats. So we do a lot of digitization. And we do that mainly for preservation, yes, but obviously that enables us to provide access as well. So consensus was that we had between 10 and 20 years to preserve our physical collections because of the combined effects of degradation and technical obsolescence on sound collections. So the availability of equipment and literally the stuff falling apart. So in response to this, in 2015, the BL created its Save Our Sounds program, which was an 8-year program to preserve our existing collection and to enable the preservation of future collections. And as part of that major program of works, in 2017, we received a major grant from the National Lottery Heritage Fund for a 5-year project, which was called Unlocking Our Sound Heritage. And it had these aims, so to transform access to and preserve the UK's most vulnerable and at-risk audio heritage, to raise awareness of the importance and the value of the nation's sound heritage, to create sustainable centres of excellence in digital audio preservation around the UK, and importantly, to involve new audiences in engaging with their audio heritage in innovative ways. And just some headline figures. So digitisation was around 160,000 physical items and just under 500,000 recordings. And the aim was to produce just under 500,000 catalogue records and to provide access to 100,000 recordings online, with the aim of making some of those downloadable. So we worked with hub partners around the UK. Everyone likes a hub, and we worked with 10 hubs around the UK, setting them up to do their own digitisation of sound collections in the regions, to produce metadata, to do rights clearance for those collections, and to return that digital data and the cataloguing the metadata back to the British Library in such a way that we could, yes, preserve it, but also make it accessible. So this was a major project and involved lots of people from lots of institutions, lots of new staff, all working to standards, all producing files and metadata that we could, yes, preserve, but also make accessible. So content arrived from multiple institutions, and it ranged from simple broadcast material, i.e. radio programs, to very highly complex field recordings. And the aim was that all recordings must be easily accessible to the public. Yes, so just the sort of curious public, people interested in listening to stuff, maybe from their regions, while also meeting the needs of researchers and of staff. So we needed a standardized metadata framework that would support both of those models of access, i.e. the interested person from the street and the researcher. So in terms of IIIF for audio, sometimes things are quite simple. So you might digitize an LP, let's say, and it has 2 sides. For that, we would produce and recommend producing 2 audio files, one for side A and one for side B, simple as that. And then taking those files, one in orange and one in blue there, you can split them up into tracks, right? So 6 tracks on side A, 6 tracks on side B. If you have metadata about the time codes for those tracks, this track starts here, ends here, the next one starts here, ends here, blah, 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 you can provide access to individual tracks from your LP or indeed the LP as a whole. Now that is something, yes, that IIIF can do, but it ain't leveraging an awful lot of IIIF technology there. You can do this in other ways. You can edit your audio files. This is the sort of thing that you would expect to see on, e.g., Spotify or Apple Music or any other streaming platform. So yes, you can use IIIF for that, and you can present the whole LP or you can present individual tracks. But when it comes to more complex archival collections, you're leveraging a little bit more of the technology. So this is a typical example of a field recording on an open reel tape. This is from the 1950s, maybe 60s actually. And you can see lots of lovely metadata written, scrawled on the back of the tape box there, because the tape may be recorded with multiple speeds or azimuth for those techie amongst you, and track configuration changes, and multiple unrelated recordings, or some recordings that start in one place and finish in another place on a tape that aren't necessarily in sequential order. Things get a bit crazy with field recordings for audio. And our logical structure ends up being quite complex. It's hard to present that in a way that is easy for either researchers or the public to understand without leveraging something like metadata through IIIF to do it. You could chop up all of your audio files. You could digitize the whole tape and have an audio engineer sit down and edit things together and merge them and create something new. But think about other digitized content like, I don't know, a digitization of a newspaper page. You wouldn't start going about chopping that image up into individual images for each article. You are losing context and you are losing all of the surrounding information around the article. You're losing information about the object. So we keep them together in a single file and use that metadata to present the audio as it was recorded. So yeah, you can join bits of audio files together and play it back in such a way that makes it accessible. And that's when we're leveraging a little bit more IIIF there to do something for archival collections that can be quite complex. So the outputs of this work was our short-lived British Library Sounds website, sadly down at the moment, thanks to circumstances beyond our control. But what you're seeing there on screen is an embedded version of the Universal Viewer, which we developed to present audio collections online, so the Universal Player. That is delivering loads of audio files joined together in a single recording so that interested members of the public can access a single interview in one hit, or whatever it might be, a song, a folk song, or some classical music, or a radio broadcast, or whatever. A nice, palatable way of engaging with the collection, made possible through that IIIF metadata backend. And then, at the same time, we use the same software, so this again is the Universal Viewer, the Universal Player, in a more research environment. So this was our on-site means of accessing material. You can see down the left-hand side there a whole track listing of various songs in this case, or pieces of radio broadcasts from the Kenny Everett collection, I think. So you can navigate around the resource. You can do more research-focused, more contextual research based on things, using, again, that IIIF metadata to present the audio to people. And that is an introduction to audio in a nutshell. So I'm going to hand over to you, Ronald. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. The slides have a mind of their own, and it really liked the image from Adam, so it has kept it. So there'll be some... Sorry? Yes. Oh, it's from you, of course. So we'll be doing some interpretation of this, not by dance, of course. So I hope you can read this, but we also, if you're interested, we're talking about making the PDF available of all these slides, and we'll do some post-processing. So one of the things that's made IIIF work is a combination, a collaborative combination between community, between standards, software, and collections, all coming together. And that's a formula we don't always have. We sometimes have 1, 2, 3, but not always 4. So why it's grown so greatly in 2D and increasingly in audio and video is this combination. Joe's already covered some of what makes it, what put it together. It's over 10 years old now and it's global. But what we're working on is developing the 3D aspect of it, a new dimension, shall we say. And in fact, it's a little more involved. But we have IIIF 3D-ish already available. So you see, at least in the images, you'll see an example from the Pavilion, the Royal Pavilion Museum's collection in Brighton. There's Jane Austen's desk through exhibit.so, is free tool online. It's coming from the British Library collection. And at the bottom is something called Morphosource, which is widely used for biological sciences and increasingly cultural heritage as well, out of Duke University. So let me just go back. What 3D can offer, though, is broadly supported, mutually intelligible ways to describe presentation of potentially complex 3D digital content. It's not just another dimension. It gets you into lots of more freedom, shall we say. So coming soon is this 3D, and what you can't see, little statue saying, we are due for the first release candidate in Leeds for the annual IIIF conference in June of 2025. So mark your calendars for early June. I hope to see you there. The 3D technical specification group has a number of tasks that it's been going through for a few years now, even more recently a working meeting in London from about 3 weeks ago. There are all sorts of things when you work in 3D. Orientation. Anyone who's looked at a model will find themselves sometimes inside the model, or so far above as if you're looking from a satellite, or it's upside down. So orientation becomes an issue of things that we don't always have to worry about in 2D. Also, the annotation question we're dealing with, lighting, cameras, and all sorts of scaling and positioning. Essentially, stagecraft. So here we are up on a stage, and we need to get people ready for what it was like to dress a stage, but in miniature, a digital diorama, we might call it. And in that, we'll have the ability to not only mix 3D materials from different collections or from the same, but also 2D and audio and video. That's where we're headed, to be able to create an entire environment where you can interact with that in a variety of ways, much as we do in 2D. And there is a fundamental problem that came up early on for 2D, which was with medieval manuscripts that are torn apart or cut apart and being able to put those back together. We have the same thing with pieces of ancient pottery or statuary that are in different physical locations. If we ever find the arms of the Venus de Milo, we could put them back together visually and virtually. So that's where we're headed with that. Let me see. So these are some of, if you can see, some of the technical specification group community support, which is a number of groups, certainly British Library, Morphosorph I mentioned, Duke, Europeana, Harvard University Library, Deutsche Museum, University of Basel. So lots of people around, as you'd expect, to build all this up. And with the challenge of bringing it all together, interoperability. The scope, which is always a bit of a challenge, is to try to get as simple as possible, but complex as necessary. So sometimes people say simple as possible, but no more. The reason is that there are lots of things that can be done. And one of the things that's confusing is there's so many different ways to express 3D, different formats. There are different challenges. Adam already pointed out the need to handle research-oriented 3D and, say, community general public 3D. So what's available to a wider world? So that is the challenge of trying to scan and capture at the highest resolution and then make available something that will load fast on mobile phones and tablets. So we want that full spectrum, and that's what we've been able to do and increasingly want to do with 3D as well. So we started the technical spec work with a number of user stories. We collected 40 or 50 of them from different communities, different groups, and then we honed them down to 6, and in the end about 5 main ones. Suffice it to say, it was a number of things. You know, I have one object I want to illustrate and make available. I have 3 things from different sources I want to make available. I'm a publisher, and I want this in a particular mode, and I want to know what is the one that was in the publication and what's later versions of it that you've updated. So all that kind of versioning challenges. Persistent identifiers were mentioned before as one of the responses. And because of the visuals, I'll keep moving on from this, and we'll have a chance to talk about it anyway. So a number of things for what IIIF calls the presentation API, or application program interface. That's where the magic lies, is you can deal with different formats, but as long as you can interchange, communicate in this API format, you'll be able to put it all together. We've been used to a 2D canvas from the beginning of IIIF. What we're moving toward is the ability to create a whole scene, and it sounds like a joke, but creating a scene, but the scene is the 3D environment within which you can put, again, 3D, 2D, audio and video. Initially, we expect a lot of people will be happy to get one thing in one box, and sort of I can then maneuver it around, but it will grow from there. I've already mentioned dealing with scaling position of models, of cameras, of lights, canvas. And positioning is important because there will be need already expressed to have a walkthrough that is programmed, so you sort of move through, or to free flow, or somewhere in between where you can make choices to go through an environment. So looking forward to that. Painting annotations. Painting is a terminology used in IIIF to say applying objects, in this case also cameras and notation and a number of things within setting the scene. The file formats I mentioned is agnostic. It's left to the viewer implementation. And thankfully, we're working with some of the main 3D viewer developers in multiple nations. So we're already anticipating where we're going. But let's say a spoiler alert, we're probably moving to a point where we're going to have to think about, for collections, being able to make available a viewer that can handle 3D, perhaps as a complement to an existing viewer or multiple viewers that handle 2D. So right now, Cambridge University has 2 viewers for its digital library. Bodleian has 3 viewers for its digital library. And that is based on having developed one and then 2 of the main ones that were already mentioned, Universal Viewer and Mirador. But that's something to think through if we want to extend and share a 3D material. So we have a sort of test case of a spacesuit. It's easy to load. And we have the ability we're developing to make things visible or hidden, and maybe in a time duration so that you can bring things into and out of view. And that can be more than one thing. Lighting from different angles, just as you would a stage. We have some spotlights on us now. And also cameras from different direction, as I mentioned. I'm going to go through this because it's probably, you can read some of that. Okay. Lights can have color and intensity. Spotlights have angles. Ambient light is the easiest thing. But all the things, again, if you've done any stage work or you're thinking about doing stage work, this will get you ready for where this is headed. Painting annotations I've covered briefly, and cameras have near and far properties, their perspective, etc. A lot of this will be for the aficionados who want to do particular things, and there'll be a simpler set for basics. So it's a wide spectrum. And you can have scenes within scenes, like turtles all the way down by some cosmologies. So the idea is that to be able to bring in something either pre-made or a model that has its own environment, and then bring up another. One model might be animated, and you might want that to be a dancing figure, and another that's still, and any combination therein, plus 2D materials for backdrops. A real project that has not yet been funded was to recreate the medieval Medici Palace from Florence, where a lot of the 2D images are in the National Gallery collection and scanned. So we don't want to have to do that again. So the idea is to bring that all together with structures that we have. And keeping one eye on the time. We have a lot of experiments for feasibility, including with these viewer makers for implementation capabilities, and also to make sure it loads reasonably well in different environments. That's a quick summary of some of the things I've mentioned. Nesting of scenes, transforming and positioning, lights, cameras, action. And here are just a couple of the experiments with different viewer environments of not just one model, but a second model at a different scale and a different orientation. And all that we have to go through just to make sure what would it look like in different environments and that it's available. And these were using a draft version of a manifest, as I mentioned earlier, which is IIIF way of putting metadata and calling up an image and giving details. One of the things we're moving toward also is something called content state, which will then let you define how you position those things over time. And I'll leave it as an intro. Maybe we can cover it later if need be. Exhibit I already mentioned is a worthwhile free tool, among other tools, to let you bring in 2D, IIIF, audio and video, and 3D as it exists now. It's worth it going for. And there's a model of a house behind there, but let's use the National Gallery front to say, we're going to put in pictures from Wikimedia in the National Gallery, and we're going to put furniture from eBay or IKEA, etc. All of this, we have digital assets that we can assemble together. It was a good prop after all. And finally, a nice quote from Nikos Kazantzakis of thinking passionately about building the non-existent and painting your paradise. And I'll turn over to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to out. Is it working now? No. Is it working now? Yes. Thank you. Okay. So you talk us through the uses of IIIF with images, maps, audiovisual, and finally 3D. And my first question, and we don't have time for many, but it would be going a little backwards and asking you, how do you start with IIIF and what skill sets are required, especially since we are discussing this in the context of institutions that might not be as advanced or staff or researchers that are not as skilled. So any comments, John? And I'm looking at you.
Just to start, I mean, obviously we've kind of highlighted you can do IIIF with images and audiovisual and 3D. Let's just assume you're going to start with images because it's slightly simpler. If you have a large folder of big images, you want to share them somewhere or you want to display them, there are a number of things you'd have to do. First of all, you need to put them somewhere where they can be stored and looked after. You need to have some piece of software called a server or the process of a server that will then share these images. You then need a viewer. We've mentioned several of the viewers that are available. They are free. You can download them. Mirador, OpenSeaDragon, Universal Viewer. There are a number of things you can do. So these are your building blocks to start with. Now, if you're a small institution, you might not have an image store. You might not have a IIIF server. You might not have the technical support to be able to do the development to create something. But you can still do this. You can still play. Now, as of recently this year, the Zenodo European Union Catch-all Data Repository will allow you to upload a set of images to Zenodo for free. They will look after it for you in perpetuity, and they will give you a IIIF manifest with which to view and share your images for free. So this is one of the quickest, easiest ways to get started and have a little look. You can put up some test images, you can put them in Zenodo and try it out. You can then have a chat with ChatGPT to build you a simple HTML web page that will present them in a free IIIF viewer. So you can do that within a GitHub environment or lots of other free serving environments. Now, these are the general things. You need a certain level of technical support to do that. But there is a lot of help on the IIIF website to do that. But those are the building blocks you need to start.
You're happy with this?
Yeah. Once you have the images available through the Zenodo or other routes, there are a lot of tools out there that you can use for free. I mean, I showed one, Recogito, but there are other tools just online that you can use, for example, to warp maps. There are tools you can use to enrich those IIIF images and make them more discoverable. Those, and those are tools that people can use who are not necessarily techie. So Stephen Gadd, who was the researcher in our project and who put together that Holler example, worked with volunteers on VI Regii, but also, curators who worked with who managed those collections before they were digitized. Other people who aren't techie can use those online tools and create data that can be then incorporated within these manifests.
Am I on? I'm on. Sounds good. I suppose for AV, but for anything else as well, there are communities online that exist to support this sort of implementation, right? So if you have a level of technical knowledge but need that push or need that advice, certainly in terms of AV, there is an AV IIIF community, there is a regular community call which you can attend if you have things to discuss. If you need support, that support exists there. There is a Slack channel for discussion of implementation of EG-IIIF for AV, and I'm sure for other areas as well. And there are IIIF recipes online for simple creation of simple AV manifests, which is all good, but, and this is a slight plea coming from someone who is, yes, technical, I speak metadata, I'm good at it, I found learning IIIF and the implementation of that complex. And at the British Library, we were fortunate enough, and still are fortunate enough, to have, you know, a technology team, a team of developers, a team of specialists who can do the implementation for you. If you are a smaller, let's say, local archive, regional museum, you're not necessarily going to have that. In fact, your technical knowledge might be down here somewhere. You might not have any. So for something to be taken up, to be implemented, yes, it has to solve a problem. Of course, it might have to make some money, but it might also need to be usable. And usable to the end user, yes, but usable to that person that needs to implement it too. And getting over that hurdle of usability, I think, is important. So if there are opportunities to make this implementation of IIIF simpler, or dare I say it, fun, for those who don't have that technical knowledge, let's say a curator or indeed a chief executive of somewhere, if they can sit down with something easy to use that they can play with and create or indeed edit and amend IIIF for some of their content in, let's say, I don't know, 15 minutes, then you've got someone hooked, you've got someone seeing the possibilities of implementation, and you can take it from there. So that's a slight plea from me to those who might be involved or interested in creating those sort of tools for implementation. Make it fun, make it simple, make it easy, particularly for those who don't have that pre-existing technical knowledge or infrastructure.
Can I just add? Is this on? Hello? Hello? Yeah. Just add, I was asked to let people know that there is going to be an interactive event tomorrow, one of the workshops with Digirati looking at implementing IIIF. So you can go along and have a little go, and they'll provide more explanation. The other thing I should say, given we are AHRC and UKRI funded here, there's a new research sort of infrastructure being built within the UK called Riches. Part of that is funding a project called HSDS, which is the Heritage Science Data Service, and that will be a UK equivalent to Zenodo that is also planned to have IIIF support. But that project has just started, but just to let people know that there is the development of UK solutions as well as the European one.
Thank you. Working, yes, oh, it was working. Just to wrap up, and if you could be very quick so we allow time for people to then leave, we are looking towards the future now, now that this cycle of the collection research is almost over. So I'm asking you, what are future challenges and future opportunities, maybe in terms of legacy, sustainability, but also maybe international collaborations? I've heard a lot, so a quick comment.
Yes, thanks. I think we ought to get our P's and Q's together, in particular principles, people, and processes. The principles, the London Charter had 25 plus years ago pointed out that digital should not be disposable. And we treat it as such because we build buildings to last, but we build collections that may be on a shelf at best. They don't always connect up. That's a problem. We said in the session before lunch that we need to have more training and get people available and make it fun. So our processes, we need to find better ways to make that accessible to people. That's a challenge, but it is one that I think we can address. And I think, like the Victorians did, we need more citizen science. We need to get more people geared up to help, including on a volunteer basis, because we will never scan at the rate we're doing all of our treasures and riches. And we won't even keep up with what we're producing new. Those are a few thoughts, I wonder. And one other thing, IIIF is one of our best bets to sustainability and any other standard like that that catches on, because interoperability more or less equals sustainability. If we don't have that, we're in silos.
Any other vision?
I'll just make a quick point about the availability of software or viewers, let's call it, to make IIIF content accessible. You mentioned 3, maybe 4. Others might exist as well. There's a lot out there, and they all do different things in slightly different ways. So all at different levels of development for different kinds of content. So, you know, I showed you the universal viewer there, delivering AV. Different viewers do that in different ways to different levels. So we end up with an infrastructure that's already complex because you have to implement different viewers in different ways for what you want to do, which stymies that development a little bit. So more collaborative work between the developers of viewers might be good to bring everything up to a level that people can make choices based on what works for their own infrastructure, not necessarily what a particular viewer will do above a different one. It's certainly a challenge to overcome.
Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy your next session.